Recording in progress.
Hello, everyone. Good day to you all. We hope that you are doing well. And thank you for joining us in this special session co-organized by the CBD Women's Caucus and the Women and Gender Constituency of the UNFCCC. It is our pleasure to welcome you here today for a cross-learning session focused on the gender action plans of both conventions and the different learnings that we can have from both experiences to make our advocacy stronger. I am Amelia Arreguin, a coordinator of the CBD Women's Caucus, but I'm here with my colleague Mishi Zingano, coordinator of the Women and Gender Constituency, as well from other colleagues helping us, Fatih Masruti from the CBD Women's Caucus, and my colleague also Ilse Beckmans from TMG Research, who we will be introducing later on when it's our turn to speak. So just a few notes before starting. Housekeeping invitations. First of all, we invite everyone to open their cameras at least for 1 minute so we can be sure that who is in this call and we can keep it as a safe space. We know that in the recent weeks there have been attacks in a series of webinars, and we are hoping to keep this space as safe as possible, right? Because of the nature of our constituencies and the nature of the exchanges that we are here, it's a high risk that we can have uninvited guests. So just help us by opening your cameras for a few seconds, and my colleagues, we will be helping to screen and see that there's actual real people behind these names, as we know most of you, but because this is a cross constituency call, it's a it's better to be safe, right, than then be regretting of not having this measure. So thank you so much, and I will repeat this for those that are joining us, and we are inviting everyone for opening your cameras for at least a couple of seconds so we can be sure that we have real people with us as we are trying to keep this call as safe as possible due to the recent attacks to some other webinars that we know that have been happening in the last weeks around the world. But yeah, definitely, I should have been starting by saying that we have interpretation into Spanish, French, and English. Hopefully, one of these languages are useful for you to engage as best as possible in the conversation. And yeah, we will be recording this session because we also know that there are other colleagues that couldn't join us and that they are very interested in the exchanges that we're going to have today. We invite everyone to send your comments, questions in the chat, although there will be dedicated spaces also to discuss, no? Like there will be a question and answer segment along the session. But if you have any boarding comment or question, please make it through the chat. And it's nice to see you all. Thank you so much for opening your cameras. And during the session, we are envisioning to have 15 minutes or so about breakout groups. So if you can help us also, in case you don't feel comfortable speaking in English, if you can let us know if in the name, like if you can rename your user, adding Spanish or French, in your name, so we know to which mini groups to send you once the time comes. So thank you, everyone. I think we can move on now, having seen that most of you are here with us in person. Just to share a bit about the objectives of today's session, it's to identify key lessons and best practices from the CBD Gender Plan of Action, or from the process of its negotiation, of the advocacy behind it, and now that we are in 3 years of its implementation, also to know about what has been working, what is not working, and what could we do together to strengthen it, as well as also for the on the climate side. We are going to listen from Mishi Singano, Policy Director for WIDU and Coordinator of the Women and Gender Constituency. We are going to listen about what is the state of the negotiations, and how is it going, and what can else be done at this point to ensure that there is a strong as possible gap in UNFCCC. And we also we will be fostering collaboration, hopefully, between the biodiversity and climate feminist advocates, right? The idea of this session is also to strengthen the collaboration amongst the constituencies of both conventions. And we will actually have, if we can go into the next one about the agenda, we will be having another intervention with us from the TMG research through our colleague Ilse Bergmans, as she will be sharing with us about one entry point that could unite actually not only the biodiversity and the climate gender plan of actions, but also the UNCCD, which the topic could be the women land rights. So this is how our agenda for today would look like. We are hoping to make this session as interactive as possible, not only to have these presentations, but actually to listen and learn from all of your experiences. Although it's going to be a short call of just 1 hour and a half, but hopefully there will be a space for everyone to engage, particularly during this the dialogues or during the breakout groups. So having sharing a bit about today's agenda and objectives, if we can go into the next slide, please, which is the first poll, and I will pass the mic to my colleague Shruti Ajit that will guide us through it. Thank you so much and welcome everyone.
Thank you, Amelia, and good afternoon, good day, good evening from whichever part of the world you're joining us here. I think it's so many worlds colliding, so many things that's happening. So we just wanted to start with a poll to get an understanding of where each of you are positioned in terms of understanding and having any kind of information of what is happening. So with that, I'm sure you'll have the first question in your poll, which is, how familiar do you feel with the objective and content of the CBD and UNFCCC gender plans of action? So this is just to understand, like, who amongst here in this participants list have some kind of familiarization with what we are, or we do have people coming responding already. We will wait for a couple of seconds. We do have some who are familiar with one of them, some of them who are who have heard of them but not deeply familiar. There's no one. Okay, we now have someone who says they're familiar with both. So good to know that there are large majority of people who do have some familiarity with at least one of the things. And if not, that's also not an issue, because that's the whole point. We will go through this session for you to familiarize yourself about both of these gender plans of action. I think maybe if you guys are okay, we will move on to the next poll. Um, do we have? Okay,
If you
okay,
just
we still
scroll
have.
down, if you scroll down, the second question appears.
Yes. Oh, yes. I'm so sorry. So the second question is looking at, have you engaged so far with gender plans of action? We do see a lot of people who have said they followed negotiations and discussions. Some of them have also contributed to advocacy and submissions. We do have a considerable amount of people, few people who have used this gender action plan or gender plan of action in national and local advocacy. Please feel free to share your experiences in the chat box. Would love to hear more about it. And some who have also not engaged directly yet. But it's a good time to also learn about this and hopefully find out how you can engage. Um, so we do have that. And then which area do you consider most critical to include and strengthen? I see a lot of strengthen the gender plan of action or gender action plan. I see a lot of people actually focusing on the implementation, which is ensuring commitments translate into concrete actions. There is a considerable amount of participants who also feel looking at securing direct finance or access to resources, sustained resources for gender equality. There is some who would also look at monitoring and indicators and then holding institutions and parties responsible for commitments. So I think it sounds like a very interesting group and a lot of interesting conversations that's gonna be happening in the next 1.5 hours. I think we can end the poll now and we can share these results with everyone. So you can see there's so many of them who are familiar, and we can see some of these. So this is just to get a sense of how everyone is placed. You don't feel like this is something you don't know. There's no right place to begin or end or whatever. Thanks for joining, and this is a good space for us to start these conversations. And for any other questions, we always have all of us. So stay tuned until the very end to know who to get in touch with if you have any follow-up questions, even after this, and burning questions. So back to you, Amelia. Amelia,
Yes,
back to you.
sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shruti, and thank you so much to you all for participating on it. Yeah, the idea was to collect quickly some views about how we are coming into this session, and as Shruti mentioned, is not to measure any like in any way your knowledge or anything. It's just about having a sense of the engagement with the processes. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I see that there are already some comments coming into the chat, and please keep them coming as they also help us to understand better your perspectives are and your views about the gender plan of action. So, but moving on, I actually have the pleasure to kick us the sharing as I will be. Just highlighting a bit of the experiences from the CBD side, in particularly about how the current gender plan of action was negotiated and the process behind it, and what is within it, right? Like I saw that some people are not so familiar with it. So those that know it, bear with me. And the idea for this session is for all of us at the very end to be slightly more aware about both documents, and so we are able to use them in our advocacy and hopefully in the daily work. So I'll be sharing that with you. And so just to share that a bit of background of the CBD, or the Convention on Biological Diversity Gender Plan of Action. The current one is not the only one. Like in the CBD, it has its first Gender Plan of Action in the 2008. And this was more focused on how the Secretariat of the CBD could embed gender or mainstream gender in their daily work as the first entry point on having gender measures in the convention. Then after it was or not necessarily fully implemented, but once its time expired, then the convention also negotiated a second gender plan of action that its time frame was from 2015 to 2020, just a 5-year instrument. But this one had made a big improvement from having the first one just focusing on internal matters within the secretariat sphere. The second gender plan of action of the CBD was already looking into 4 spheres, into the policy side, in the organizational, at the secretariat, but also at the national level, in the delivery sphere that they consider it as the implementation or actual application of it, and the constituency that it looked more into not the caucus as the constituency, but as the actors relevant for the implementation of the 4 objectives, which the first one was integrated gender perspective, promote gender equality, demonstrate the benefits of integrating gender, and increasing the effectiveness of implementation. So this second gender plan of action was more, again, focused on proving the case on why or how gender perspective could make biodiversity policy more efficient. But coming out from that gender plan of action and through a process of reviewing it, it was more and more evident that this part of just mainstreaming into the policy was not enough in terms of achieving the objectives of transformation that we all as gender advocates have been asking or demanding. So during a process coming or starting in the SBI, which is the Subsidiary Body on Implementation 2 in 2018, when that second gender plan of action was being reviewed, these reflections I'm sharing were made more evident. In terms of, yes, we are implementing what is in the second gender plan of action, but it's not enough for a transformative change. And also because in parallel, you might know that the CBD was also discussing or negotiating its next strategic framework, which you might hear already about, the Global Biodiversity Framework. So that was one of the positive or the supportive processes that allow us to have a stronger gender plan of action that we have now, because while the biodiversity community was discussing the global biodiversity framework, there was a shared understanding that a transformative change was needed, and that the business as usual within the policy, the biodiversity policy, was not longer acceptable. So we had an enabled environment as feminists, as gender advocates, to ask for more than just having gender mainstreamed in policy instruments, but to demand actual or more ambitious actions for those transformations. So I'm just sharing here like how the process went and was enabled because all of this evolution or parallel process that also when the process to negotiate the GBF itself was accompanied by a decision, the decision 1434, that asked for the GBF itself, or back then was called the post 2020, to be developed in a gender responsive manner. You see, like, it was not only about negotiating the gender plan of action, but the main process within the biodiversity was asked to be gender responsive. So this is just to show that we had this enabling environment for to have a more deeper discussions in what the next gender plan of action should include. And there were a series of workshops with ministries, with negotiators, with experts that also allow different advocates, allies from different places, from different sectors to come together to strategize and advocate together. And yeah, it just to show again, just to reinforce this point about that by having this bigger negotiation around the CBD strategic framework, allow us to push stronger for a gender plan of action that goes beyond the business as usual. Because you also might be aware at this point that within the global biodiversity framework, there was a big negotiation of having a standalone target on gender equality. And while the discussions were playing out, there was a big questioning about, yeah, but how does gender equality can be achieved, or how exactly do you implement it, or what do we have to do as parties? No, that was one of the main questions. And for us, the answer was really simple. It was just implement the gender plan of action. Just do whatever the different steps that the gender plan of action is telling you. By implementing them, you can already achieve the target 23. 22 back then, and when the GBF was adopted, because there was an extra target, it became the target 23. And just to share here that there was a huge campaign coming from different actors, from different perspectives, including having these champions within the parties from different regions, and them embracing the idea of having the target 22 and having then target 23, and then in parallel to have a robust gender plan of action that could guide that implementation. And just to share this as a background, and now sharing a bit of what is within the CBD GPA, I just want to highlight these two paragraphs of the decision that says and speaks directly to this that I was just sharing. The gender plan of action, its purpose is to promote and support the gender responsive implementation of the whole GBF. Because if you have read Target 23, it says that the Target 23 is to ensure gender equality across the convention and support the gender responsive implementation of the GBF. This is a bit like a circle or reinforcing loops in between the different documents. Like Target 23 says GBF has to be implemented in the gender responsive way. And then, therefore, the purpose of the gender plan of action is to support that particular action. But also, and this is another part of the GPA that is really key for us, is that the GPA is not only for the GBF, it's actually for the convention. Like it goes beyond just the strategic framework, and should also support the implementation of associated mechanisms. In this case, means the monitoring framework, means the resource mobilization strategy, the communication strategy, the education strategy, because once the GBF was adopted, there were other series of parallel instruments that which their objective is to support the implementation of the GBF. Therefore, the gender plan of action was also designed with having all of these other instruments in mind. And another detail to share about this, the current gender plan of action, which goes from 2023 to 2030, is that in terms of its structure and its content, it also made a huge leap from the first and the second gender plan of action, because now looks more like a more robust strategic instrument that includes not only objectives, but now has clear indicative actions, possible deliverables, even included some proposed timelines and responsible actors, because the first two versions of the CBD gender plan of action were slightly open in that end. Like they didn't identify who was supposed to be responsible for which actions or by when they should be implemented. So it was more open in the air. But this, the design of the current GPA allows for better monitoring and accountability. Just to share a bit of the three outcomes and how they are organized. The first one speaks about ensuring that all people, in particular all women and girls, have equal opportunity and capacity to contribute to the three objectives of the convention. And just to share a bit of an anecdote here is that all people took ages to be accepted, because all people could be interpreted in so many ways that the parties, some of them were against having that, because it could speak, and it was actually the intention, but we know that the different, it could speak about gender diversity, and even if that was the intention, in some countries, this is not one of the like it is a no-go. So it ended up, instead of being all women and girls in all the diversity or other type of gender diversities, it ended in being all people, to kind of ensure that that is still covered. Just to share a bit of why in the CBD we are not yet speaking about gender diversity, but because there is a huge resistance within so many parties. Quickly to share about this first outcome has 5 objectives, and I know Ilse will touch very much about objective 1 that speaks about land rights. So I will rather focus on objective 5 because it's one of the most achievements, or one of the most things that we are proud about, because it is this gender plan of action as policy instrument in the environmental arena is one of the few that actually names and speaks about gender-based violence. So objective 5 of the CBD GPA mandates the identify, elimination, prevention, and respond to all forms of gender-based violence. So we have been using this objective 5 and the whole GPA as one of our stronger flagships or a stronger advocacy arguments during the years after its adoption. And I will share a bit about this later on. Just moving quickly, sorry about the other 2 outcomes. Outcome 2 is focusing on biodiversity policy planning and programming decisions. Should address equally the perspective, interests, needs, and human rights of all people, in particularly of all women and girls. So outcome 1 was about women and girls having the means, having the spaces, having the tools for equally participate. Outcome 2 speaks about the policy, the planning, and the programming, right? For them to be gender responsive and from them to be developed, taking into account all women and girls' perspective, needs, and interests. And therefore, the objectives 1, 2, and 3 speaks about that, about how the MBSAPs and how should include them, how there should be meaningful and effective participation of women in all CBD processes, and so on. And lastly, objective 3 speaks about all the enabling conditions that have to be created to ensure the gender responsive implementation of the GPA. And this includes about developing national capacities to produce gender and biodiversity data, to strengthen the evidence base, to understand better the dynamics of gender and biodiversity, either positively or negatively. Objective 3 that speaks about access to information and public participation, to have synergies, and I guess Ilse will touch also about that a lot in terms of that one of the enabling conditions to ensure the gender responsive implementation is to actually look into the other conventions and other processes and how they could reinforce each other positively, to allocate resources, to allocate financial resources, to allocate people, to allocate their time for the implementation. No? So as you can see, this gender plan of action went from only having gender mainstream in policy, as was the first gender plan of action, to look into all the different spheres and the different dimensions and the different changes that have to happen for for all women and girls to be supported to effectively engage and implement the convention as a whole and the GBF as its strategic framework. Just mention two more points, and I will pass the mic to Mishi to speak about the climate gap. It's that the decision for this gender plan of action, the 2030, came also with a game changer provision, which is inviting all the governments, parties to the CBD, to appoint and support gender and biodiversity focal points, which would be these people within the governments that are responsible or the first point of contact to ensure that all these gender provisions are being implemented. And just lastly, inviting everyone to join as a gender and biodiversity champion, which is one of the campaigns, but at the same time is one of the flagship advocacy strategies that we have for the gender plan of action to be not forgotten, because even if it took a lot of time, of discussions from parties, from different actors, from ourselves as constituency, it hasn't been in the top of the head of the negotiators and the implementers, right? Like it was a document. It is a document that is strong, that it has so many opportunities, but it's not one of the priorities to be implemented. So as constituency, we came out with this campaign that invites not only the parties, but everyone in all the environmental community to sign up as gender and diversity champion, to know about the CBD gender plan of action, to commit themselves, either if you are in an NGO, either if you are in a research center, if you are in a philanthropic institution, or wherever you are, to commit yourselves to go through the GPA to begin with, and to pick the actions that speak to you and implement them. So I will stop here, just sharing a bit about the background of the GPA, what happened during the negotiation, what is within it, and now how we are advocating for it to be uptaken in every of the CBD negotiations, in every of the CBD discussions. So I will stop sharing here and will pass now the mic to my colleague, Mishi Singano from the Women and Gender Constituency from UNFCCC, as she is going to walk us through what is happening in the climate convention and with the update of its gender plan of action. So I see you are here, Mishi. Hoping that, and now we see your screen. And soon we will be hearing you.
Hello, I'm here. Give me a minute to share my screen. Please, okay. All right. So thank you so much, Emilia, and the team. I also wish to thank you for organizing this session. This is the joint session between the Women Caucus and the Women and Gender Constituency. However, I do wear two hats because I'm also part of the Women Caucus at the CBD. So it has been amazing to see the progress that we have made. And my question for you, Amelia, and the team, which colleagues who are working specifically from the Women Caucus, to really, if you could also share some of the strategies that you have used in Montreal in the lead up to the adoption of the post 2020 to the actual adoption. How did we get the target itself and all the work that has been done to get this an ambitious gender plan of action. I think that will really be keen to understand the strategies that has been used, especially as colleagues from the Women and Gender constituency about to pack their bags and head to Berlin to fight for the gender action plan. So without further ado, allow me to share a little bit. I saw on the question that has been asked, there's significant number of people who only know one action plan. So as Amelia has said, in the UNFCCC, we call it Gender Action Plan, while in the CBD is the Gender Plan of Action. So allow me to take a little bit in the history, as Amelia has done. So out of the three Rio Convention, the UNFCCC, CBD, and CCD, UNFCCC was the only convention that didn't have the mention of women's rights from the beginning. And it really took us until 2001, where there was a language on the on gender, and this was specifically related to participation. And from there, there have been a lot of work, and they only, between 2001, there was a gap that there was no reference to gender or women's rights until 2010, where the next mention or the next decision which referenced gender was related to adaptation. But with the work, sustained advocacy and work that was done with the Women and Gender constituency and other partners as well, including progressive government, as we speak now, we have more than 20 decisions in the UNFCCC that reference gender or related to gender in different negotiating items. As some of you might know, we're engaging in the UNFCCC, negotiating different gender items, and the work of the constituents has been to ensure that all agenda item has a specific components related to gender, or to ensure that gender is at the center of those agenda items. So in terms of the timeline, just to give you a picture of where we've come from, as I said, COP7 is when we had a first reference of gender when it comes to participation, and then we had another one related to adaptation and etc. And in 2022, we have the first one promoting, we have a decision promoting gender balanced participation in the negotiation and representation of party, and then that has was in our view the beginning of establishment of the Lima Work Program on gender. So in 2014, which is COP20, the UNFCCC established the first Lima Work Program on gender. Was 2-year work program, so was renewed in 2016, and it was extended for 3 years. But then they decided, after they adopted decision 2016, they decided to create a gender action plan for the Lima Work Program on gender. So the first action plan was adopted in 2017, and it was 2 years work program because it's sort of like finalizing or finished. There was a 1-year gap between the work program, which was adopted in 2016, and its action plan. So in 2019, in COP25, they adopted the 5-year Lima Work Program and its action plan. So it was adopted as one package: the action plan, the work program, and the action plan. And then in 2024, last year, we adopted, we renewed the Lima Work Program for 10 years. Unfortunately, they were not able to adopt the action plan, and the action plan will be adopted this year. So it's important, an important distinction to make between the gender action plan in the UNFCCC and in the CBD. As Amelia has said, the CBD gender action plan is anchored in the implementation of the overall framework, while in the UNFCCC Gender Action Plan implements the Lima Program of Work. So it's this implementation mechanism of the Lima Program of gender specifically, and that is an important distinction to make, and that in so many ways its limit, its potential to really have a system-wide impact at national level. So Emilia has shared how the Gender Plan of Action and the CBD is organized. For the UNFCCC, it's organized in 5 priority areas: capacity building, knowledge management and communication, gender balance, participation in women leadership, coherence, gender responsive implementations and means of implementation, and last, monitoring and reporting. So under these 5 priorities, usually you have objectives, and then you have deliverables, you have who is leading, you have time frame, etc. So there is a set of activities on all these 5 areas. So just to look back, because as I said, the previous agenda action plan has lapsed. We had a new renewed work program on gender adopted last year, and now we are crafting a new gender action plan, and we are hoping it will be ambitious. But to look back from what we have learned from the previous work program and this action plan, that what has worked well, it's really allowed acceleration of appointment of the National Climate Change Agenda Focal Point, while in the CBD, National Agenda Climate Change Focal Point are just being adopted now, but in the UNFCCC, they are already institutionalized. We have more than 140 governments already have National Agenda Climate Change Focal Points, and I think there is a lot of lessons and learning that we can draw from what has worked in terms of having National Agenda Focal Points from the UNFCCC, and what we can give lessons to colleagues in the CBD, but also the action plan and its Lima work program of gender and its action plan has really helped in tracking progress in terms of participation. And even though it was not mandated in the actual either work program or action plan, several governments decided to have their own national agenda action plan. And in so many ways, in some of those action plans, which has been adopted by national government, they had some specific capacity building program for women in grassroots organization, indigenous community, which was a huge progress. We have learned for the years of implementing the previous GAP and work program that unintended consequences of having a dedicated work program and the GAP, it ended up siloing issues of gender. So we have seen, for example, as we engage in adaptation or as we engage in finance, negotiators can easily say, you have an entire agenda item, just put everything gender on that agenda item, we are not prioritizing gender in this negotiation. So that was an intended consequence that for this upcoming GAP, we really need to find ways to end that unintended consequences. But also, after years of having a national agenda of climate change focal points, overall they have experienced a number of challenges which has been well recorded, including recognition from their government and lack of clarity in terms of their mandate within their national delegation when it comes to negotiation, but also lack of mandate and recognition in terms of leading work at national level. And more importantly, one of the challenges that has been shared is the resources. Most of them, they're excited to do work, they're excited to connect with the community, but often they've been told by their governments, where's the resources to do this work? So those challenges, even though the intention was good, there's lack of support to the national agenda climate change focal point, and it's good to see that the CBD gender plan of action clearly did mandate government to provide support to national agenda focal points for the CBD. But also other challenge that we have seen throughout the implementation of the both work program and GAP was the event-based in terms of the coherence. So most of the activities are just implemented for the sake of it, or to tick the box. There is no continuity and follow-through, etc. And that has limited the potential and expected impact of that. And last, but definitely not least, most of the activities were really binary, and it's lacked the broader integration of intersectionality. So the references, for example, for women, building capacity of the women, it's just like literally referred to like a biological women, or even like it didn't even go further to engage women with disabilities, or women who in urban women from urban poor settings, or rural women, etc. So there was really a limited understanding when it comes to implementation and lack of intersectionality. So those are the things that we have learned from the previous GAP implementation, and we are looking forward to address in the current GAP. So just to bring you to where we are now. So after the adoption of the work program last year, we started with a workshop early this year in June during the SB sessions. And the workshop was really technical in terms of like to bring government and civil society to look through and have technical exercise to reimagine how do we translate the work program to the GAP, but also to understand the external context. So it was like a really well designed and participatory action process. So out of that, they did manage to produce the draft, like an informal note of the gender action plan. So that is the document that we have now. There was the second workshop, which was held in Addis, and this workshop took us to the next step, where parties and civil society were invited to spend like a good 2 days, I believe, and a half, to really interrogate deliverables of the proposed gender action plan informal note, so that we are able to take a step forward. And the expectations is when we get to Belém in the coming few days, then parties will give mandate to the co-chair to produce a draft, which will be the basis for the negotiation. So in the current informal note, which comes from Bonn, and just to give you, of course, there is a number of activities. We have more than 100 deliverables as of now, which is a lot. But in the section of coherence, for the first time, there was like a specific mention, even though it's bracketed, the specific mention of building coherence and strengthening coordination of subsidiary bodies of within the Paris Agreement, but also related UN entities and processes, including specifically CBD and CCD, even though it's referenced in terms of the secretariat of not the entire process. Our desire would be like a comprehensive coordination, so that the GPA and both the GPA from the CBD and the GAP from CCD and UNFOC, all of them are being coordinated, but now it speaks more of like coordination with the secretariat. As I said, all of these are bracketed, but it's really a step in the right direction, and it identify the leading and contributing to be identify contributing entities to be national gender focal points from this convention. So the national gender focal point and the CBD to be coordinated, engaged with the national gender focal point from CCD and CCD and CBD as well. So that is at least a text that we have when it comes to integration on the Rio Convention. And the last part I just want to echo, and we really became, I think my colleagues from the Women in Gender constituency will really benefit from your, from the experience from the CCD on how do we advance this agenda. But out of all the action from the Women Agenda, we feel that an ambitious and action gap should be flexible in terms of like creating space for for government to really timely discuss and deliberate use on emerging issues, but also being able to respond to the emerging need, especially given we are operating in a context of climate change where everything is shifting quite fast, strengthening the coherence within the UNFCCC, but also within the Rio Convention and beyond, including coherence with the gender machineries at country level, embracing intersectionality. I've spoke quite at length in terms of the challenge that we faced in the previous GAP, and in this, like, you really want the GAP to address that challenge and to have an expansive understanding and inclusion so that we really can leave no one behind commitment that most of the government have made. And related to that, we think like an ambitious GAP should be inclusive in its form and processes, but also in outcome. It has to be measurable, and definitely it has to be resourced. And it was pleasing to hear from the GAP, Gender Plan of Action from CBD, that it has a specific objective on resourcing. So we have means of implementation under D, and we're looking forward to really have a very clear commitment or activities that will culminate to resourcing not only implementation of the GAP, but also implementation of gender responsive climate action at all levels. So with that, I think that's all from the us. As you all know, we are having this session quite at this busy time because most of us will be starting our journey to Belém, and the feminists and WGC member are really prepared to engage and influence to deliver an ambitious gender action plan in Belém, and looking forward to hear from you. You are learning lessons, tips and tricks, how you have managed to do it in the CBD, and what can we learn so that this desire and ambition of delivering an ambitious GAP in the coming few weeks become reality. So I'll pause it there and take you back to you, Emily.
Thank you so much, Misha. And this has been also super enlightening us for all of us that are not so engaged with the climate, but I guess also for those that are engaged in the climate, there are still questions about what else can we do together. And yeah, thank you so much for walking us through so much information in a super gentle way. So let me not lose a bit more of time because the minutes are really precious. So I will now invite our colleague Ilse Perkmans, Program Manager for the TMG Research, as she is also going to help us even connect more dots in how all of these gender plan of actions, even the one for UNCCD, are related, and how can we push for their joint implementation. So let us welcome Ilse. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you very much for these nice words and for having me and inviting me to speak here. Yeah, exactly. So we're talking about what can we learn from one gap for the other. What can we learn from the conventions, and women land rights or land rights in general is actually an entry point to improve this coordination and coherence between the Rio Conventions. And at the same time, the Rio Conventions provide a good platform for us to advocate for women land rights. So now this might be a little bit abstract, but just to make sure you understand what I'm talking about, let me try to screen a video. Hold on. That will explain how land rights, secure land rights, and effective climate action or environmental action are linked.
Look at this plot of land. What do you see?
Hold on, does it work? Yeah, okay.
The vegetable, farming, we're feeding. But as climate change makes lives more vulnerable, with droughts and floods depleting vital resources, adapting to its impacts becomes even more difficult without secure landmass. You see, we carry the world's problems and the solutions to solve them. As many climate pledges rely on land to reach their mitigation goals, That same plot that sustains families can be targeted for afforestation or reforestation, piling an endless array of expectations on a very finite resource. The consequence is that the people already made vulnerable by climate impacts are more at risk, potentially losing access to their land due to climate action initiatives. That's why land rights in all their forms must be central to climate pledges so women can lead the way to meet them. The Women's Land Rights Initiative works to achieve just that. We're a network comprising an entire political spectrum of partners.
Okay.
Women's land rights, Rio Conventions on Climate, Biodiversity, and Desertification. We're developing a roadmap to ensure global agendas, standards, and processes reflect local realities so that women can unlock the solutions that power transformation for us all. Let's unite to shape the future of our land.
Sorry, I just realized there's some Women Land Rights Initiative part to that video that I wasn't aware of. But, oh, hold on. It's going on now. Let me share my presentation. Yes. All right. Yeah, so this video just meant to explain why land is crucial to achieve the targets and the objectives of all the three Rio Conventions. So whether we are talking about land degradation and soil restoration under UNCCD, obviously we land. We're talking about biodiversity protection. Obviously, we're talking about land and its resources, but also under UNFCCC mitigation and adaptation measures. Almost often, or almost always rely on land. So that's why it's the perfect entry point to work actually on the issues of coherence between the three Rio Conventions. So yeah, we made an analysis to find out to what extent are women land rights currently already captured in the Gender Action Plan, so the Gender Plan of Action. And indeed, we looked at all the three global gaps. So maybe what we found is, like, first of all three conventions actually recognize the nexus or the importance of gender equity for effective environmental action. So yeah, that's a very good recognition. But of course, the next question is, how do we see this in objectives and activities and in funds, etc.? But the recognition of the importance of it and the nexus between the two is there. Then all three gaps refer to human rights, and the CBD does so explicitly referring to the right to clean and a healthy environment. But also the other human rights that are closely related to land, access to land. And also all three gaps actually call for more research and data that can be used as evidence for evidence-based advocacy and awareness raising on this linkage. Maybe a second the second element of analysis that we looked at is, like, to what extent do the three gaps include access to resources and land rights for rural and grassroots women. And there again, we actually, all the three call for access to resources, with the difference that the CBD and the UNCCD gap explicitly refer to land rights and access to land, and the UNFCCC talks about access to resources more generally and focuses rather also on access to technology, to knowledge, to funding, etc. So yeah, so they all refer to access to resources, with the difference that CBD and UNCCD call for access to land explicitly. Then the aspect of representation, leadership, and participation of women is also something that is reflected in all three gender action plans. And So it's about, generally, it's about participation in decision-making processes of conventions. So participation in the design and implementation of environmental action. The CBD and UNCCD particularly zoom in or particularly highlight also the participation of women in decisions on land use planning and whether or not or how to apply sustainable land management practices. The UNFCCC is more general, or focusing more explicitly on the decision making in the convention processes. And they all three call actually for technical and financial support for grassroots women organizations, but also for female governmental delegates to participate, for example, in international events. But also technical financial support for Women Caucus and national focal points. And I highlighted the last one because, similar to what Mishi already mentioned, I think the translation, the implementation of the global gaps at national level is very important, and perhaps in some cases also still the missing link or the weaker part of it, and capacity building in terms of knowledge, training, awareness, but also financially supporting the national focal points is very important and is also recognized in the 3 gender action plans. The fourth aspect that we looked at is to what extent gender mainstreaming in the planning and reporting processes of the conventions is integrated. And there again, we can say that all the 3 gaps call for a better gender analysis, gender sensitive impact assessments, and especially also gender integrated data with evidence that can be used for improved planning, for better policy decisions, and joint learning, also across the 3 gaps of the conventions. So that is functioning mostly important for the planning, better policy decisions. The second one is about funding. All 3 gaps are actually calling for appropriate resourcing of gender activities, which is currently also a very weak or partly a weak aspect of it. So there's a strong call for gender responsive budgeting. The UNCCD also calls for a benchmark for allocation of funds and a gender marker, and direct access by grassroots organizations to funding. So this is really like a shared concern in all the 3 gender action plans, and I'm highlighting these shared aspects because that provides us room for joint learning, for joint activities, etc. And the last element under the mainstreaming aspect is using harmonized disaggregated indicators. We'll have a bit of a closer look at it in a bit, but yeah, there's a strong call for harmonized indicators because it would reduce the complexity and the resources that are needed for reporting, for example. I think currently the reporting and the data collection is a challenge in many countries. So if there's anything to win in terms of efficiency by harmonizing indicators, that would be very important. And as I said, all the 3 gaps, the way they are currently, already call for that. So the question is, of course, now, so what can we learn from CBD or UNCCD for the UNFCCC gap that is coming up? We already saw the similarities, right? We recognize that women's rights are important for effective climate action. We already talked about the promotion of women's participation in environmental decision-making, promoting access to resources by women, emphasize the importance of improving gender mainstreaming in all the planning, monitoring, and evaluation processes. and a call, I didn't mention that one yet, a call for a coordinated approach between the conventions, which is actually explicitly also in the current gender action plans. In UNCCD, they explicitly call for a coordinated approach on responsible land governance. That's very particular for UNCCD. But all three gender action plans call for a coordinated approach, as both. Well, Misha, I'm not. So mostly at a global level, indeed. So there are some references to capacity building of national focal points. I think that would that would touch on the topic of better coordination at national level. But indeed, most of it refers to coordination at the global level. Yeah, I just want to, one of the first aspects I would say that we can learn from the CBD gender plan of action is a stronger or a more explicit reference to land rights for women. So currently it's implicitly included under access to resources, but it would be very nice to learn from the CBD how to include it more explicitly. So I just give this as an example. Amelia already touched upon it in her presentation. Under CBD, we have outcome 1 that talks about the contribution of women and girls to achieving the targets of the convention. And actually 1.1 explicitly refers to improving or increasing the rights to ownership and control over land and access to natural resources. And under this result, there's three sub issues. So one is the baseline and data that should be collected on the relationship between secured access to land and resources at national level. But it also talks explicitly about the improvement of the national legislation to ensure secure access to land by women. And it explicitly refers to the participation in decision making, including a decision making related to land tenure, and property. So this is just what is currently in the gender plan of action under the CBD. And maybe another example of how land rights are very explicitly included under the CBD that we can learn from, or that what we would like to see under the UNFCCC as well, is, for example, the target 22 that actually calls for gender responsive representation and participation in decision making, etc. And it, in a way that it respects the rights, the cultures and the rights over land, territory, and resources of women and indigenous peoples. Yeah, so this is the target with the, with the indicators that were approved or adopted last year at the last CBD COP. Just to give a few examples, so there's the proportion of the total adult population with secure tenure rights, which is SDG indicator 1.4.2. Another indicator on the proportion of total agricultural population with ownership rights, and the share of women among those owners, which is the SDG indicator 5.8.1. The number of countries where the legal framework guarantees equal rights of men and women to access and control over land. The land tenure in traditional territories of indigenous peoples and local communities, and trends in land use change and land tenure in territorial rights. In traditional territories of indigenous peoples. So this is just things that are really big steps in our view on what has been achieved under CBD that could inspire us and hopefully many other people with us for the UNFCCC revision of the GAP. So to conclude, what can we learn from CBD and what is it that we wish for under the upcoming Gender Action Plan? So an explicit recognition of women as stewards of land, the recognized inequalities in land management, as is done under CBD and UNCCD currently. Explicitly promote women's secure access to land and natural resources, including also through legal reforms. The promotion of women participation in land use planning processes and women's leadership in decisions for sustainable land management practices. Building capacities of national focal points and national gender focal points to translate the gap to local action. And to be fair, Michi already mentioned it. I think where CBD could learn something from UNFCCC is the impressive number of gender focal points that have been appointed at national level under UNFCCC. I think, I mean, this is not a competition, right? Obviously, but I think in that sense, CBD is lagging behind, and UNCCD, we forget about that one. Yeah, and then the mainstreaming of women land rights in all the objectives, activities, indicators, and the budget. It's really important that we put money to these activities, otherwise nothing will happen. And also without, we need indicators so people are forced to report in it. And if you're forced to report on something, you're kind of forced to implement activities. So it's a very important lever to make sure women land rights are being addressed in practice. And I am aware that the whole indicator discussion is complicated and probably beyond, or maybe beyond what we can influence at this level. But I strongly believe we should be inspired by the land indicators that are included under the CBD. And a last element that shows up in CBD is the prevention and responding to GBV, in particular in relation to access to land and resources. One of the things that was not yet in the gap of UNFCCC, and that's been advocated for the new gap gender action plan. If you want to have more detail, you can link that all to different outcomes and particular pages, etc. I can share a document of the gender submission that we submitted to the SB in June. I say we, but I mean the Women Land Rights Initiative, which is a group, a community of women land rights activists. Yeah, so this is really in a nutshell, maybe a few examples of what we could learn from CBD and what we hope to see in the future gap under UNFCCC. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ilse. Thank you so much, Michi, also for your presentations. We're going to jump straight into the questions, for which I invite my colleague Shruti to help us go through them. And just a quick update, since we are obviously running out of time as always, we will cut out the breakout groups, but still we want to listen from you the answers for one of the main questions we have for you all. So just if we can be slightly brief in the Q&A so we can have the conversation with everyone here for the guiding question. Thank you so much, Shruti.
Thank you, Amelia. I think with those, I will only maybe take 2 or 3 questions. I apologize for the others who may have been missed out. It's not intentional. And I also encourage the speakers to also respond to the ones who are not to the questions which are not responded on the chat itself. I see Amelia has already done that for some. Thanks for that, Amelia. So I think the 2 or 3 questions maybe I can ask all of you at the same time. One is for Michi, is what is the women and the gender and climate women's caucus strategy to advance in the negotiation of just transition work program? And for Ilse, it's what is the call, actual words for direct access to funding for women. And the third question is, considering the imperative of enhancing capacity building for Gender Action Plan in biodiversity and climate, how can we map and make visible the diverse realities, contributions, challenges faced by women worldwide, particularly through accessible platforms, a joint database maybe? Uh, so these are the three questions, one for Mishi, one for Ilse, and one for all three of you. So feel free to address, if, I don't know, maybe Mishi wants to go first, and then Ilse, and then whoever wants to respond to the joint database question. Mishi, over to you.
Yes, I'll be happy to start, and for interest of time, I'll just be brief because I'm really keen to hear from all of our colleagues in the call. What can you advise the women and gender to do to make sure that we deliver an ambitious goal? So for the WGC, when it comes to just transition, we have so many technical asked, and we're happy to go through it. Like in the coming few days, we'll share the WGC overall key message, but the overall ask for the Just Transition Work Program, of which we have agreed and discussed with the other constituencies, including the trade union, Yongo, and civil society, is really calling the parties and the co-presidency in particular to make sure that we get out of Balem with institutional mechanism for the Just Transition Work Program. We strongly believe that the current setting of the Just Transition Work Program is not fit for purpose. Cannot advance and support countries to do the real justice transition. It's just a bunch of dialogues and a conversation, which are also limited in terms of the time. So we are calling for establishment of the mechanism, institutional arrangement, and we have like a specific proposal of that mechanism, and we even give it a name. It's called Balem Action Mechanism. So for those who will be we're happy to share more details and kindly join us to advocate for establishment of institutional arrangement for just a transition work program so that it can be practical and can support implementation and accelerate just transition around them. Thank you.
Thanks, Mishi. Thank you so much. And thanks for being short. Ilse, I would request you to also be short and concise, and over to you.
Yes, it's very easy to be short because I don't have a good answer right now. So that's a good thing. It's a pity also. Yeah, basically direct access to funding, it's not very explicitly described what that means or what that should mean, or not that I'm aware of. Maybe I should have to go back to the text. As this is not very explicitly described, yeah, there's different, I think it's important to make different initiatives visible and different things we are trying to do to make funding more accessible to grassroots organizations. So I think RRI, for example, is funding some initiatives to really like pool funds at local level people can apply to, etc. So I think it's our task to actually come with solutions and successful examples at grassroots level, things that work, to actually show what could be done and how this could be improved. That being said, particularly for UNFCCC, of course, also the issue of loss and damage funds is very important discussion to see how we can make sure that grassroots actually get access to these funds. Thank you.
Thanks, Ilse. Thank you so much. Amelia, any last words or question to respond to the question?
I'm trying to answer in the chat for the sake of time.
Thank you so much. If that's it, I would also request Ilse and Mishi to look at the questions and respond to them in the chat. And then we move on to the next segment, which Amelia is, I'm giving it back to Amelia. So over to you.
Thank you so much. But actually, the microphone is now on your side of everyone else, apart from those that we have already spoken. And because, as mentioned at the very beginning, one of the main objectives of today is that we can come together with ideas, with experiences, with already proven strategies that can help at this point to continue or to actually help our colleagues in the climate sphere to come out from COP30 with an adopted GPA and with a strong adopted GPA. So now if we can share the whiteboard, and we're going to be taking notes of everything that you would like to highlight. Here are the questions for you. Just one question exactly. What lessons, strategies, or experiences would you like to propose to shape the future of the next climate gap? Because we know that all of you have experiences at different levels of advocacy, engaging in policies, advocating for something, even convincing people, no, even if it's in the daily basis, like what has worked for you, what we should be using, what kind of strategy should be put in place at this point to advance the climate gender action plan. Mishi already showed us what they have been doing, what the different strategies that for years they have been implementing, the state of the situation at this point. So we are inviting you to be creative, to let us know from your side what actually has worked, or not necessarily in the climate sphere, but in general, when you are advocating. So please raise your hand so we can give you the mic. When you are advocating for something in your work, at home, at the university, what type of a strategy do you use? So if we can, yeah, we are going to give you the floor. Angela, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm Angela Opondo. I'm from Kenya, but I'm doing my PhD in South Africa, and I'm basically looking at indigenous knowledge because my focus is on female-headed households and how they adapt on the ground to the effects of climate change and these gender roles that they carry out as individuals. Like most of our policies and most of our initiatives and frameworks, there is that gap. There is a really big gap between indigenous knowledge, what is actually happening on the ground, and the policy narratives that are being translated into government, into law. So it would really be very, very interesting to be able to advocate for all these things, because all over the world, even not just locally, globally, women are actually doing something on the ground to adapt to the effects of climate change, and they still have these other care roles that are unpaid care work. And for example, in my country, when there is floods and they have to take care of the families, maybe even disabled people, like the wheelchairs can be washed away, the clutches can be washed away, and it's up to the women to be able to find a way to take them to safety. And they do all these things that are never actually seen as things that are actually taking care of the ground to be able to be sustainable in taking care of their households, their communities, society, and their country. So indigenous knowledge is one of the things that would really help to be able to advocate for. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. Definitely that is a critical point to have. And perhaps after we hear from Angela, Camila, and Salvatrice, maybe Mishi, you can come back again and let us know if and how these points have been embedded. So Camila, please let me ask you to unmute so you can forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The question was phrased or framed very generally, not just like on political spheres. So I'm going to share a little bit of my experience on that. As a migrant, I've often had to kind of, especially during legal procedures, advocate for my own rights, and something that worked really well a few times. It's very confrontational, but it works, is to copy when your clerk or the person that is handling your case or that is actually appointed for a specific topic or specific set of group of people is not responding, is to send a very formal letter and then copy everyone in the hierarchy above. I've, on occasion, especially, I've even copied the mayor. And I've even copied the mayor of neighboring towns, because of how structures work where I live. The mayor of the town where I actually live is not the same mayor as the town that that handles my paperwork on migration, my visa, my residency, for example. So having my mayor that may be of a different political party being copied on, look how that mayor is not doing his job, and look how that office is not doing their job. Usually they respond very poorly in the moment, but a week or 2 weeks after the issue is resolved. So that's something that's worked really well for me. And also as consumer protection activists, specifying if you're feeling let down by a specific agency, specifying if this issue is not resolved, I'm going to go to that body that makes the audits on you and that controls you, and I'm going to make a claim for you. That's also worked really well. I've made a claim. I had very big issues with one very big German bank, one of the top German bank known in the world. And I actually made a complaint on the organism that oversees banks in Germany. And then I told them I made a complaint there, and then the issue was resolved. So kind of triangulation in that sense has worked really well for me on different issues. Yeah, not sure how to translate that on the international landscape, but just sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Camila. And please, Salvatrice, if we can hear from you.
So much. I'm happy now that I see just a transition coming in. I think this is very important when you talk about climate change, when you talk about gender justice, when we talk about sustainable development. There is no sustainable development without gender justice, and just transition is the key. I hope that within this new gender plan of action, this will become clearly, and it will be clear for parties. I have been implementing the project on the feminist and feminism and gender justice and the just the transition. It's a new concept that people don't understand, and it's a new concept which is happening now in the global discussion, the global agenda. So thank you so much. This is what I went to highlight. I went to also to highlight intersectionality. Intersectionality has been not clear also. We talk about gender, but when it comes to intersectionality, when it comes to women with disability, there are women, other vulnerable groups like LGBTQ community, those communities, sometimes they are left out. So thank you so much. I think this will come out with the helping the development of the new gender plan of action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Salvatrice, also for sharing your ideas. We are going to hear now from Berta, please.
Gracias, querida Amelia, queridas compañeras, rápidamente. Our experience is that the key support needed by the women at the local level is support empowering women in the local level, strengthening development and women at the local level, extending the leadership of women at the local level in women organization, politica, advocates, direct funding, and economic autonomy. Our experience, this is a principal topic that is needed in the women in the local level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Berta. And I see that. Thank you also for sharing that in the chat. We're going to take note of these strategies. And I will invite now Mishi so she can help us to make a, well, we have one more hand, And after Caro, if you can share, and then we are going to come to the closing, and I will also share a bit of the next steps, because this is just the first part of a conversation that we hope we can have with all of you in the few next days. Caro, please go ahead.
Hola. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. I'm going to speak in Spanish for more clarification for my ideas. Thank you. Bueno, gracias por este espacio. Quisiera decir dos cosas. Uno, pues la importancia de visibilizar y reconocer un poco más la relación entre educación y conocimientos locales. Y una de las experiencias que estuve trabajando antes de tener que dejar todo el proceso es cómo poder articular las instancias formales y no formales de educación a nivel local con los promotores y generadores de conocimiento, como los adultos mayores, como los pescadores, cazadores, recolectores de frutos, todos los que tienen conocimientos en torno también a cambio climático, las relaciones con la luna, y esto cómo entra a los procesos de los planes de acción construidos a nivel comunitario en las escuelas, pero también en los espacios sociales o comunitarios entre padres de familia, pero también entre expertos locales. Y una de las experiencias que teníamos era con cazadores, pero también con mujeres recolectoras de frutos, profesores que en su mayoría pues son mujeres también, y cómo poder invitar a los diferentes espacios a esos sabedores del bosque, del agua, del mar, a los espacios oficiales o formales y no formales, para que sean ellos los que transmitan esos conocimientos a través de reflexiones propias locales con los contextos propios locales, pero al mismo tiempo como eso va a generar una base para la toma de decisiones en las redes propias de gobernanza local, como en la generación de espacios de protección, pero también como estos espacios van a pasar a otras instancias a nivel regional e internacional, porque se supone que la base de todos estos acuerdos internacionales son los territorios como tal, porque son los ecosistemas básicos que se están conservando con cada una de las actividades que realizan tanto mujeres, hombres, pero también las relaciones intergeneracionales con los chicos y con los niños y los jóvenes en territorio. Entonces, pues, ¿cómo podemos fortalecer también en ese plan de acción, en uno de los espacios que también se estuvo trabajando hace unas semanas para el plan de acción de educación sobre biodiversidad, y se articula con este plan de acción de género en cuanto a las diferentes instancias generadoras de conocimiento en las instancias promotoras de educación y transmisión de conocimiento? Ese por un lado. Perdón lo rápido. El otro punto es la importancia de enfocar y profundizar un poco más en qué significa ser defensora y cuáles son los diferentes ámbitos, instancias o em, em, eh, formas de generar esa defensa, porque lo que he visto, pues teniendo que salir de mi país y verlo también representado, así como una de las compañeras que acaba de hacer una exposición, una presentación sobre su experiencia como migrante, es que aún hasta las mismas instancias oficiales no entienden qué significa defender cuando hay tanta influencia de las redes sociales, y que se queda el concepto de defender como un concepto individual de extroversión, pero no del rol que jugamos muchos, especialmente en el ámbito de biodiversidad, y es este rol de alguna manera introvertido, pero que juega un papel fundamental en mantener esos fuegos y esperanzas locales que se llevan también a diferentes ámbitos, tanto regionales como nacionales. Y es aquello que es intangible, ¿sí? Y que a veces es muy difícil de exponer, porque muchos de nosotros no salimos en los medios de comunicación o no somos un rostro visible públicamente o políticamente de alguna otra manera. Y los gobiernos o las instancias que llevan a cabo esos procesos de indagación para protección de defensa empiezan a crear nuevos conceptos como, por ejemplo, un concepto de encriptación de ser defensor. ¿Sí? ¿Qué significa eso de ser jugar un rol encriptado, que es uno de los conceptos que usan para evitar la identificación de quiénes son los defensores? Entonces es importante empezar también a profundizar un poco más en cuanto a la defensa de defensoras y cómo la participación no es solamente generar los espacios para que las voces de las mujeres estén allí, sino también cómo la red de mujeres para la biodiversidad puede empezar también a salvaguardar aquellos procesos que están siendo vulnerados por cuestiones de violencia de género ambiental en los territorios. Gracias, esos serían algunos de los puntos.
Muchísimas gracias, Caro. Thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing your experience and your ideas. We are running out of time, actually super behind of schedule. So we're going to hear from Raquel, and after that we are going to close. But I thank you so much for sharing your ideas in the chat. We are taking note of them. So Raquel, over to you, and then we will have Mishi for the closing. Thank you. Sí, cierto. Lista.
Ahora sí, ya, gracias. Rapidito nomás, y lo he puesto, las estrategias creo que lo vamos haciendo bien con esto de la campaña, ¿no? De los campeones por la biodiversidad, que de lo que se trata creo que es recoger casos, y eso es lo que nos falta, ¿no? Demostrar lo que ya se está logrando. Y creo que en la línea de incidencia también, por el recuento que nos han hecho hoy día y todas las sesiones que se han venido participando, hay mucho que demostrar. Entonces es como sacarle lustre a todo lo que se viene haciendo para motivar a más mujeres, a más redes y crecer más en movimiento y ser más fuertes, ¿no? Y eso incluye también la articulación que debemos tener entre los distintos espacios y movimientos. O sea, no solamente las convenciones se articulan, sino también las redes de mujeres nos articulamos. Y eso creo que es una cosa potente que debemos aprovechar. Nada más, Amelia. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Raquel. And hopefully we took note of your points. Thank you so much. And Mishi, if you're still here with us, which I hope you are.
Yes, I'm still here with you. So thank
Thank
you so much for all the advice, questions, sharing on the strategies. In fact, my colleague who is co-coordinating the gender working group with the University, Claudia, is in the call, and she's been taking notes of all the key action. I think just before I close, just a key few reflections on the comment that have been raised. When it comes to indigenous knowledge, we are trying to push for it, and then there's a little bit of language around it in the current text of the GAP. We'll do our best to defend it. There is language related to the safe space within the UNFCCC, for example, including asking the COP presidency to monitor how COP spaces are safe for women, and that's including, for example, making sure there's a provision of nursing room, etc. Like really making the process itself like inclusive, but by extension also addressing the structural issue when it comes to related of like violence and exclusion as related to women engaging in the climate and environmental space at national level and international level, and calling the UNFCCC to model how safe space look like in the policy in the policy processes, so that government can be able to replicate that. There is some language and activities related to international knowledge transfer and several others. So we really taking note, and it felt good to see that we align, because the current draft has been product of like a lot of like activist work as well. And we are happy to work with everyone to really push and advance some of the activities that are important to our colleagues. So this is an invitation to all of you, whether you're coming to see to Belém or not. But if you have specific experts, our doors are open. I hope my colleague Claudia will also share her email address so that we can be reached if you have any specific recommendation on the language or what needs to be done within the framework of the current text. We'll be happy to check that. So with that, allow me to thank my colleagues from the caucus who have been doing a lot of heavy lifting for this session. And this heavy lifting is despite the fact that most of them were attending a meeting for the last 2 weeks, but they still managed to do that. So extremely accept our extreme appreciation for making yourself available to engage, to share the experience and also to share the strategies of what has worked. They have been and they continue to be a clear call to all of us to work closely together, because we all know that women don't live a single life. We all know that our issues are intersecting. So on behalf of the Women and Gender constituency, and I believe Emilia will share this sentiment, we are making deliberate effort to continue to work together. So the session like this will not just be, arbitrary session, but we are hoping in the next year also we'll have consistent exchange between our caucus, because we have seen a pattern where some of the parties will go to this convention and block and use that to block progress and say, like, this was not accepted in this is not good. So us teaming up and coming together really will advance a collective agenda and making sure that we have a holistic approach when addressing climate and environmental crisis. So thank you so much for those who have been with us for more than one, and it's almost 42 minutes. So for giving us your 12 minutes of your time. So without further ado, allow me to welcome my colleague, Emilia, to wrap it up and give the next step.
Thank you so much, Mishi, and to everyone involved in the call. On my side, just to say that we're going to follow up by email to send the recording, to send the slides. We take notes of the questions that couldn't be answered, so we're going to ask the speakers to also provide us with their views, their answers, so we can share with you like in a nice package with all the resources. And also to share that we wanted to collect these ideas from your side, as we are planning to put together a 2-pager with this type of feminist or gender advocate strategies as a 2-pager that we could put out to the different constituencies, the different networks of experiences that have worked around the world. And we're gonna reach out to you again in case there's something else that you would like to add, any idea that maybe come up to your mind later, and if you want them to be included in this type of document. And also just to echo what Mishi said, that the intention is that this type of exchanges can be more regular. We actually started last year. We hoped that after the triple COP year, we were really optimistic. And as you are all really busy and engaged in so many processes, but we have the intention, many of you have asked about this within the different constituencies. You are part of the different constituencies, so just to ensure you that we are looking for ways on how to move forward together, particularly based on what Mishi just said, no? Like, we are facing a lot of pushback in the different spaces, so there's the only way of addressing them is being coordinated and strong together. So thank you so much to you all. Thank you so much for the interpreters for your patience and staying with us. Thank you so much, Ilse, Shruti, Fatima, and everyone that make this call possible. We will follow up with you, and we will send the invite for whenever the second session will come. Thank you so much, Mishi, and all the team in the climate convention too. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Amelia.
you.
Just apologies for jumping in. Can we have a group picture after wrapping up the
Please
call.
forget about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
May I ask you to activate your camera and show us your beautiful smiles? Another one.
If the interpreters feel like doing it too, please, you're always part of these efforts and you are pretty much experts now in these policies. Thank you
Another
so
one.
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, and good luck to you all traveling to Belém. Stay safe. Hopefully you won't fall ill. We need you healthy and strong. And please reach out to you all. Stay safe. See you soon.
Thank you.